Well, it's keeping us in business, so that's a good thing for us. I don't know if it's good for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this Papelbon thing that you tweeted out the other night, I find it to be very interesting. We kind of danced around this last week when you were on about would there be a freeze on trying to make deals. It seems that going back to June, though, that potentially there was some people saying, I don't know if we're ready to make deals until we get things in order here.
It's still not clear exactly what happened, but Mike, you and I talked about this about a month ago, right? Where I told you that they were stepping up their efforts to try to trade Johnathan Papelbon, and now it's clear from talking to other teams that they thought the Phillies were about to deal him. I don't know if we can use the word close. They were certainly within reach of making a deal with one of these teams. We know pretty reasonably with pretty reasonable certainty the teams they were talking to. Cubs were in there, Blue Jays, Rangers, Dodgers, I've heard Tigers, and they were telling several teams that they were getting ready to trade him, so make your final offer. And then suddenly they hit the brakes again, and it never happened. And so here we are, we're 3-4 weeks later, and you can still trade him. But the problem now is, if they traded him then, he was the only guy out there who did what he does. Now you're getting into a period where Aroldis Chapman could be available, and Tyler Clippard is almost certainly going to be available. Francisco Rodriguez, Joaquin Benoit. I've heard Henry Mejia's name. There's going to be a lot of relief pitchers on the market in a week or so. There were almost none a month ago. So I think they've really made their job more difficult, more challenging by waiting. And you know what happens if they don't trade Johnathan Papelbon in the next 3 weeks. Have a really happy camper on their hands.
Yeah, absolutely. At this point, is he in the same boat as Hamels, in your opinion, then, where if Andy McPhail is kind of saying, hey, wait, let me kind of get a grasp of things, could there be a freeze on that? We had Keith Law on last week, and he said, look, if you can get anything from him, just get rid of him. Cut the money out. Doesn't matter. But do they find that Ruben is that incapable of making a deal that they don't want to allow him to do it?
Again, it's not exactly clear what happened on the Papelbon front, but the perception in the industry is that when they slowed up, that came from above Ruben, that it came from Pat Gillick, or it came from Andy McPhail, or it came from both, or it was out of a desire to wait until Andy was on board. And, I've talked to you over the last couple of weeks about Andy and Andy's style of doing things. And, as I've talked to people in the last week who have worked with Andy, dealt with Andy, they describe him as being very deliberate. And, he's very patient till he gets what he wants, and then he gets to be incredibly decisive. But, these are two guys that the Phillies are going to control beyond this year if they choose to keep him. And so, if you look at Andy's track record, it's really easy to envision Andy preaching patience and saying, we don't have to trade him for less than full value. And that's, but especially in Papelbon's case, he's blocking Ken Giles, right? It's obvious now that their MO is to try to find out what certain young players can do. You're seeing evidence of it in the lineup every night by who plays and who doesn't play. So don't you have to find out if Ken Giles can close? I think they believe he can, but so there's so much merit to just moving these guys out of the way and moving on. But I don't know that that's the Phillies' philosophy.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because you obviously saw what Ruben Amaro Jr. said the other day, Jay, that basically Cesar Hernandez, and you've indicated this, that he deserves the right to play. He's played very well, and that he's the best second baseman on the roster. It seems that they're willing to make those concessions in some areas, but not in others.
I think one thing that we've seen since Pete Mackanin became the manager is that there's a real philosophy now to who plays. It was hard to sometimes discern what that philosophy was when Ryan Sandberg was in charge, but we've now seen a lot of evidence that Darren Ruff is going to play first base, certainly against left-handed pitching, so they can find out about him. And they're giving Odubel Herrera a chance to play more, to find out what he is. Certainly with Galvis and Hernandez, that's the case. Dominic Brown, they're giving him one last chance. And so I think we can now see a pattern to what they're trying to accomplish with these last 3 months. It's certainly not to try to win games. It doesn't matter anymore. So if that's the pattern, let's be consistent about it. But the problem is you've still got these high-paid veteran players who block the path to doing that the way it probably ought to be done, and you owe them something too. So it's easy for us to say what they should do. It's harder to actually do it. And that's just one of the many reasons that, Ruben's statements about Chase were so hard to understand. I don't know. I ask you, I know you've talked about it, but is this the way you answer that question if you're the general manager? Is this the way you handle the end of the career of one of your most iconic players? What do you think?
We discussed that yesterday. I don't know how he comes out and basically buries the guy and says he's not better than the guy we have out there now. I understand saying young guys deserve to play, but to flat out say that the other guy is just a better player right now, you're right. And the way he spoke about Howard in the offseason, I think you see a couple of cases of this. And you had said, I think, a way back where, he's tired of getting beaten on and banged like a drum, that people keep saying that he's not doing a good job. And, maybe he said that the last time when he said the fans don't understand the game and all that kind of stuff. It just seems that the walls are caving in on him.
Well, I'm not ready to say that, but the art of answering these questions is one that you'd think Ruben would have perfected by now. He knows how to say nothing. He can be really good at it when he wants to be. It's just hard to understand the way he answered this question because there were so many ways to answer it. It's so easy to say Chase is a long ways away from coming back, and let's see where we are when he's ready to play. We can make those decisions then. It's so easy to say that. The other thing is, I've kind of gotten some indications that Ruben and Chase have talked about it before he ever said anything, and that Chase knew this was coming. So I guess I'm not sure why neither of them, and particularly Ruben, said that the other night. At least it would have made this look much better handled. You would have been able to understand it if Ruben could say, Chase and I have talked about this, and Chase understands, or Chase is on board, or this is not coming as a surprise to Chase. But to say it the way he said it, and then when asked about whether or not he'd informed Chase, kind of dance in the other direction, I guess I don't understand how and why he answered the question the way he did. Especially
considering that Chase Utley's probably going to be out, a handful of more weeks, probably 2, 3, 4 more weeks, that he didn't really have to, bring this to the forefront now.
That's exactly right. And, Pete Buchanan's been asked this question now. He's only been in the job for a week and a half, almost 2 weeks. And he's been asked this question 3 or 4 times and has done an excellent job of tap dancing out of the way of it, because it's so easy to be non-committal when you don't know when the other guy's coming back and you don't know what the future holds for Cesar Hernandez. I don't know. There just seemed to me no reason to do that the way Ruben did it. I just can't see where it leads to anywhere positive.
Jayson Stark with us, ESPN.com senior baseball writer here on 97.3 ESPN. Jay, do they view Cesar Hernandez as a possible future second baseman starter for this team? I know when he was a younger prospect, you heard a lot about him, but then he kind of got morphed into this utility role, and now back to being a second baseman at 25. Do they say, look, this guy could be our second baseman for 5 to 7 years?
Well, you and I have talked about him for years. Way back before I was on your program every week. I know that I told you that, in my view, he was the most advanced position player prospect that they had. And the problem was that there was a guy in his way who was one of the greatest players in the history of the franchise and wasn't going anywhere. And so, all right, they tried to make him into a center fielder. They tried to make him into a third baseman. They tried him as a super utility guy. And, he was put in positions to fail. He was put in the position of trying to be something that he he wasn't going to be. He couldn't be. And believe me, when it looked this spring like they might actually try to get him through waivers or they might deal him, other teams were drooling over this guy. So we don't know what he's going to be, but you can see the ability, right? He's got almost as many hits in the last 3 weeks as Chase Utley has all season.
Wow.
He's a switch hitter. He walks. He controls at bats. He's clearly got a plan. He can run. He can lay down a bunt and beat it out. There's a lot of stuff that this guy can do, and I mean, we'll find out in time whether the league is going to make adjustments to him and he comes back to earth. It's certainly likely that he does. It happens with most young players as people figure him out, but he has been in the big leagues now for a long time, and he's adjusting and he's playing well, and other teams view him as a good player, maybe not a great player, but somebody that. The one thing Ruben's right about is he deserves to play a lot.
Yeah, it's evident that we want to see him out there. The other thing I found interesting from Ruben, he did say that Nola might come up after the All-Star break. Now, we've discussed him a lot, but is there a reason why coming up after the All-Star break would make more sense than just say, you know what, we need a starter on Saturday instead of using David Buchanan? Look, this kid's earned it. Let's just use it. Is there some sort of timetable, service time thing that we're missing out on, or is this them just saying we want to give David Buchanan another shot? I don't get it.
Well, I mean, a couple things are at work. I think they want Aaron Nola to have the experience of pitching in the Futures game. I think they view that as a really important part of his journey to wherever he's going. And so I do think that that's part of the equation. That's
valid.
It's a big honor to pitch in that game. You're pitching against the best. You when you walk into that room, you realize that you're viewed as one of the special young players in the sport, and it does something for a guy. It does more than just pitching on a Saturday just because somebody has to pitch. And the other thing is, David Buchanan isn't completely off their radar screen. He just, he got off to a bad start. He got hurt, and they're right now looking at their rotation the way it should have been looked at all along. Instead of running guys out there just because somebody has to pitch that night, there should be a purpose to everybody who takes the mound, and guys who potentially have a future should be the guys in this rotation. And that's why you've seen Kevin Correa walk on out the door and Sean O'Sullivan spin through that door, and maybe Jerome Williams won't be far behind. They're going to load their rotation with guys who they hope can be a part of something down the road, and they're going to find out who they are.
You mentioned, the fact that this team, they had veterans. You had Howard, you had Utley, and then do you think that was hard for Sandberg to stand up to those guys? Like, do you think deep down he wished he could have played some other guys, but just couldn't stand up to those guys? Do you think that maybe was something that was hovering over top of him? Like, I would have liked to play Cesar Hernandez, but Utley was here and I just couldn't do it. Do you think that factored in at all?
I know that they think so. And, we had some glimpses into that at times, and then Ryan Sandberg would back off. I feel like after he picked that fight with Jimmy Rollins in spring training in 2014, he was never quite the same in a lot of different ways, but especially in trying to deal with those players of that stature. Just was never comfortable taking the stand. You remember last year he talked about how Darren Ruff needed to play more, and it was possible that Ryan Howard was going to have to play less, and that lasted 2 days, and then Ryan Howard was right back in there. Look, I think one of the most difficult jobs in baseball, certainly if you're a manager, is trying to manage guys who were great players and are now on the decline. That is really difficult to do because it's so hard for those players to look in the mirror and understand what they are now versus what they were then. And it has to be handled delicately. It takes tremendous presence and communication skills. I think one of the big reservations about Ryan Sandberg was that it turned out he really wasn't a good enough communicator, and that's a shame.
Yeah, last one for Jayson Stark. By the way, the All-Star Game Tuesday night. We'll talk some All-Star Game on Tuesday's show with Jay. But, obviously, Home Run Derby, Millville's Mike Trout, not going to do it. We hear this a lot in the NBA with the dunk contest. The best players don't do it. Would you have liked to see Trout and some of these stars to be a part of this, or is the Major League Baseball All-Star Game starting to go the way of the NBA where the better players don't want to be a part of it?
I actually think that one of the things that has separated the Home Run Derby from the dunk contest is that the stars do participate.
Yep.
And, hey, Albert Pujols with 500 and was 26 home runs, he's going to be in there. Prince Fielder, who's won this twice, he's going to do it. I really wish Mike Trout would. I'd love to know why he's not. If he thinks it's going to mess up his swing, I can show him evidence that that's probably not true. And I wish Bryce Harper had. I understand that, all right, he wants his dad to throw to him. But it would have been better for the sport if he were out there on Monday night. And just a shame, I think, that these guys can't see the big picture. I know that the rest of it matters, but go up there and take your hacks for 5 minutes is not going to mess you up for the rest of the year unless you let it. And I have lots of evidence that shows that this Home Run Derby jinx is complete fiction.
Maybe we'll discuss that further on Tuesday. Don't forget, everybody, summer's here, Wild Pitches, The Stark Truth. Check them out at Amazon from Jayson Stark, as I want to see people cracking open a book at my pool this weekend, and I want to see Jayson Stark's mug on the front of that book when I get there.
And I hope you Instagram it if that happens.
All right, man, enjoy the weekend, and we'll talk to you at the All-Star Game.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mike.